Cleaning up a barn in your off time isn't really that exciting, but I do want to make it into something a little bit more entertaining, both for myself, for my friends and family to see, and for those of you out there who are trying to do something similar or learn something from the channel. We will be going into the spring soon and doing some gardening and garden related projects, greenhouse stuff, all sorts of things on this channel, but it's all, relatively speaking, about DIY projects. Welcome to the Barn to Workshop project with John Decker. That's me. I'm John Decker. I don't know why I keep saying that. I gotta figure out a better opener here, and I'm trying to piece all of these videos together of me making this workbench, and I don't know at this point what I have or have not talked about yet, as it's been more practical for me to just come out, plug in the camera, set it for time lapse, and get rocking on things. I will say right now, I feel like I'm struggling on this one. I was pretty clear on how to make a table, i.e. the part of the workbench that is the top of it, basically. But I also knew I wanted to make drawers, and making drawers is not something I'm comfortable with. I'm also not buying any material for this. I'm literally using the scraps and junk I have around the garage here to clear it out. And that is a tough limitation. I also am not using drawer slides. I realized that was going to be pretty dang expensive. I just, in order to get good drawer slides, like heavy duty drawer slides, I was going to be spending like $60, $70 a drawer, which was just not practical. I can make it work the way I'm going to show you, but it's going to be something where I want to potentially replace those pieces of hardware in the future. Behind me, you see the, I want to say, 75% complete version of the current workbench that I'm on. I made sure it was tall enough so I could use the five-legged stool. Somebody in the comments in a previous video told me never to get rid of it, and I think they're right. As ugly as it is, it's going to constantly be a reminder that I've come from here to something else. Now behind me, you're going to see some roughness about the fact that I don't really have a lot of woodworking skill, but I can put stuff together. So I'm going to tell the story here, and I will show you the process. I began by working on the floor. I started from the ground up with the workbench top upside down to account for the unevenness of this old barn's flooring. Then I stripped down some 2x6s into 2.5-inch widths and created a box frame using lap joints. As I understand it, a lap joint is a simple notch cut into the wood's end or middle to make two pieces fit together squarely and evenly. It's not a fancy joint, and it doesn't require a lot of skill. It requires patience and 90-degree angles. I also took some 4x4 cedar posts that I had purchased as cull lumber back in 2020 and cut them down to 40 inches each. I cut notches out of the top of those 4x4 posts and near their bottom to create the point of connection for two box frames. I don't have the proper terminology here, nor do I know what terms to look up to define this process. I really hope the footage explains the parts I'm referring to here. I'm sure folks in the comments will have their thoughts on what to call this part of the build. I created a space below the working bench top to put shelves, cabinets, drawers, or similar items. Because the floor is so unlevel, I decided to build in some adjustable furniture feet. The parts I had were an inset threaded furniture foot. I had to drill into the base of the table leg and then insert this threaded foot and screw it into the leg. The foot had a minimum height of 3/4 inches and a maximum height of 2 inches. It turns out that's a good thing because the slope of this floor is about 1.5 inches over 4 feet. I've done a little bit of jiggery pokery to make sure that this bench ends up level. Even though there are some adjustments that I can make, it's as close as I can get to level for now. I think I'll hook the bench top to the wall like one might with a taller cabinet. It doesn't technically need that, but because it's up to those little feet rather than sitting on the square end of the posts, there's a little bit of wiggle to it that I don't like. Some of that wiggle is from how bouncy the floor is in here. I also needed the table to have more side-to-side support to withstand the sawing motion on the work surface without shaking back and forth. To make it more stable, I added some X-frame supports. Although some of these joints are glued, the table legs are just screwed to the frames in case I want to change things in the future. Next, I started on a framework for the drawers themselves. I've never done drawers like this, but I saw a guy on YouTube doing plywood shelves without drawer slides, and that inspired me to move forward with them. He did the drawers without slides because slides are expensive, especially if you're doing heavy-duty drawer slides meant for a lot of weight. He made the drawers interchangeable. It was clean looking and neat, but it used a lot of sheet goods that I don't have. I also knew there was an IKEA style drawer that was in my wife's bathroom cabinet. They had the drawer slide on this rectangular piece of MDF. On the side wall of the drawers was a slot cut to match that rectangular piece to give the drawer a place to slide and keep the drawer from tilting as you pulled it out. The material that I had to use for that exact purpose was limited in width, so I would have to build these drawers differently using both other designs as inspiration. I created these drawer slides using stripped down pieces of 2x4 material that I cut into smaller parts. There are 3 strips of wood per drawer slide. I used dunnage and other materials to make these drawers, and it took me a very long time to get to the point where I had all the drawers boxed in. Every drawer was an adventure, and I was scrambling to find the materials to put them together and make all the sizes work together. I had to work around the materials as I found them, which was frustrating and slow. At this point, I nearly quit. I had to step away for a few days and work on other things to return to the Workbench project with a clearer vision. You see, the idea I had been working toward with the drawers was to make drawer faces based on the shaker style using 2x4 materials and old 70s paneling boards that were ripped out of our living room in 2019. That was a terrible idea. The 2x4s were split and twisted and warped because they're all junk wood from the coal piles and other things. And yeah, just realized very quickly that there comes a limit to what you can or cannot do with certain materials. I can't use those because the more I got into it, the more time it seemed to be taking. And I realized for the temperature outside and what I have available to me for tools, it was going to take me another 2 weeks just to get the drawer faces done. And I don't have the time to deal with that because I still have the rest of this project to handle. Yesterday night, before I went in, I went ahead and planed down some boards that I've been saving. I didn't know what I was going to use them for. Probably originally I was thinking like outdoor boxes or something like that. But these are boards that came out of a portion of our house that used to be called the summer kitchen. It was a dirt floored area of the house that had a divider and some shelves and random junk on the wall. It used to be the place that people back in like the 1910s, 1920s would like prep their food, especially meat foods. And so it was just kind of like an unfinished section of our house. But on our house like taxes, we were paying for that area with the dirt floor as though it was square footage of the house. And the attic. The guy we bought the house from had counted the attic of that space as square footage in the house. Considering that was a thing, we went ahead and I, got my renovation on and got that done and turned it into a laundry room. But it meant that I was able to pull out a lot of this wood and junk that was just sitting in there. And some of it was really just deteriorated and unusable. And some of it seemed like it might be solid enough to use. So here's a good board example. Now, anyone who's a woodworker is going to look at this and know exactly what my problem is. You see all these little pock marks and holes and things like that? That means this wood got moist and little mites got in there and dug in or ate through the wood. These aren't termite holes, just context-wise, but they are very similarly damaging. So you can see all these little channels in it, and now that I've planed it down a little bit, you can see them. On the back side, you can see the damage pretty dramatically. And this is where like the little like mites had gotten in and torn it all up and run different directions and stuff like that, depending on what they were doing. This was originally a part of an inside wall panel. When I had this sitting in the back corner of the garage here, the barn here, I didn't realize it was this bad. I thought that this panel might be usable for a shelf. What I'm going to use it for is a drawer front. Now, it doesn't cover the height of the drawer, so there will have to be another panel, another piece on top of it. This one's a little bit better shape, but it's got some, it's been used. It's wood from a floorboard or something, probably a wallboard actually. And it'll go up, and I've got enough to cover this whole thing. What I'm basically going to do is use a wood hardener on the surface of the material here, especially in the areas where there's a lot of pock marks and holes and things. It'll be solid enough then to handle the getting bumped and whatnot. But we're not going to be pulling on this wood. It's going to have bolts run through this front, through the material at the back, and just like a normal handle, and be able to use it that way. Well, I think it turned out okay, so I'm happy with that. I am going to wait to sand this as well as paint it until I can open the door to the garage and it's not 20 degrees outside. So that'll have to come at a later date. I know I had mentioned that I was going to seal these and make them like harder. I put wood hardener on them, but I think I'm going to wait on that until I've gotten a chance to sand them first. This turned out okay. There's a few parts where the alignment isn't exact, and I think that's because of the wood slides. They're a little bit off on the inside, so I might play around with that a little bit. But it turned out okay. There is one drawer that sticks. It's this one. I think it's just because it's full, really full, and you got to keep in mind that these are just, I haven't even sanded the wood slides on these yet, so you know it'll be good, and I'm happy with it. This is more drawers by a long shot than I've ever had in this garage or in this workshop before. So that's awesome. They're already full. The only thing I paid for on this workbench, paid for. Technically I paid for the wood that is the top and the sides and these beams here. Everything else was random bits and pieces from scrap wood or free stuff that I'd gotten along the way. And then of course I paid for the screws, which I have mounted underneath. So all total, if I go back in time and think about what I've spent on things, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's call this a percentage of what I paid. So 5, 9, including the screws, which I have not used the whole buckets of, and I have no way of like parsing out individual screws, but I had to buy the buckets anyways. I've probably got less than 200 bucks into this. Most of that is in the screws because the screw buckets are 74 bucks a pop. So since those are mostly full still, let's pause in the screws. So without screws, 10 bucks maybe worth of materials, but a lot of time. So in my previous video that I put out about, is it, you can get free materials or you can get cheap materials, but you're going to spend a lot of time getting them and processing them and using them just to make something that you could buy. The question then is, was it worth the time that I spent making this? Is it good enough quality for the time that I spent making it? For my purposes, for what I have income-wise right now, yeah, this is going to work just fine for what I need. And the ability to take those wooden slides off from the inside and replace them with actual metal in the future is always there if I want to do that. I just feel like that's a lot of money. I might find something, in a garage sale or whatever, but these handles came from the house. So when we bought the house, there was a built-in cabinet that my wife did not like. And so we took it out and I kept all the hardware from it. So that's where these handles came from. On the bottom side here, I'm pretty satisfied with the way it turned out. There's a few nitpicky things I might look at when I'm sanding it as far as how it's put together and whatnot. But the drawers are pretty solid. They've got a little bit of play, just enough to get it to go in and out, even though it's just those wooden slides. And yeah, I did okay on the alignment here. I'm going to sand this middle section because the bottom board here is where it should be. And it got a little tight as I went up, but I wanted to make sure everything lined up on the edges just because that's a little bit more difficult to mess with. There is some sections, like in this one here, where there's a little bit bigger a gap, but the gap down here is the same. So I think what happened in this instance is this piece of wood wasn't exactly square on one side. I used the side that was the straightest when I was doing the glue ups. I haven't sanded the glue ups. Heck, I haven't even been, like this hasn't even been 8 hours. This thing, I was just like, you know what, I don't have time to mess around with this. So this actually has 3 screws running lengthwise into it because it's just a short piece here. This one, I put staples on the back. I don't know if I left that in the video or not, but I used just like a, 1/2-inch staples on the back to hold the back together while I was clamping it, because I found I only had one clamp that would span this whole thing. Yeah, I mean, this is my happy face. I'm happy this is done for now and it's usable and it'll stay in this condition, in this shape, this like unfinished material-wise as far as like painting or whatever for a while. I don't know what color I'm going to paint it. I don't even know if I'm going to paint it. I kind of like the way that it looks now. I have to get some of this excess paint off of this piece here. But if I could seal this all up, this actually looks okay. It looks a lot better than I thought it was going to look, to be fair. But I'm probably not going to go with white if it does end up being paint. So either way, thanks for joining me on this really long one. I hope that you made it all the way through and I didn't complain too much. This one just got me. It's a lot of learning along the way, and I'm pretty sure I did it all wrong, but it'll work, and hopefully that's all I need. All right, so here's the deal. I gotta do it again. I have to do the whole thing a second time. I might not do the drawers though. That'll be something else. All right, I'm gonna get off the floor. Ugh, getting too old to sit on the floor. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more of me building stuff here in the garage, please, the workshop, I'm still getting used to calling it that. Please like and subscribe. And yeah, I mean, that's basically it at this point. It's just workshop projects, but look forward to stuff coming up this summer. We can get outside. All right, that's enough. Turning off the camera. Time to be done.